You're listening to Big World Network.
Bloodshot Buck, Season 2, Episode 4. Written by W.H. Wood and Mitch K. Allan. Read by Willow Wood. Ava measured her breath and clung to the clasp on her harness, ready to unclip it and leap from her seat at any moment. Their carrier shuttle lurched as it re-entered the At-Shield over Training Ground 3, a section of the asteroid dedicated for synths to train in a tenuous atmosphere and with minimally modified gravity. She and Michael stared at each other from across the aisle. Neither really registered each other's gaze, but Ava was thankful to have something to focus on. She admired the craftsmanship of his fitted suit, the black metal weave, the indistinct outline of his figure, a suit tailored to Michael and no one else. The synth symbol blazed in red upon his chest, the familiar, flat, 5-fingered hand with veins snaking across the palm. James stood next to the door in his shiny new mech suit. Bloody hell did he look like a mountain on titanium legs. She saw his whole face through the screen of his helmet, clear and rounded to permit him maximum visibility in an otherwise claustrophobic suit. He was grinning like a child on an ice cream trip. Without provocation, Michael burst out laughing. Ava looked back at him, infected.
What?
She giggled. Unlike James, the lower half of Ava and Michael's faces were hidden beneath their helmets. Michael didn't look like Michael with only his eyes showing. They were intense, their colour so dark they looked black, and they had a distinctive, powerful shape that she didn't know the hereditary origin of. She averted her gaze, embarrassed for noticing.
We're freaking space marines!
He cried. James's laughter roared inside Ava's helmet. She felt so giddy she checked her oxygen meter wasn't pumping out double dosage.
All right, Nuggets,
barked Tara. She stood from the co-pilot's seat up front and grabbed onto the handholds in the ceiling. Her words crackled from inside her helmet and directly into theirs.
We drop in 2 minutes.
Ava unclipped her harness and took hold of the ceiling bars. Her boots for this mission weighed 31 kilos. They had been carted onto the shuttle and set into place so she could sit down and have a techie fasten them on before takeoff. Already she could sense that the asteroid's naturally weak gravity made them lighter. Michael, his boots identical to hers, lifted one foot and then the other.
I am so pumped,
he muttered to himself.
Get a hold of yourself,
snapped Tara.
This ain't a playground. There are 500 things just waiting to go wrong down there, and believe me, the endgame ain't as close as it looks. You will feel breathless, you will get migraines, and for God's sake, Sterling, if you get a nosebleed, don't you dare try and fight through it. Am I absolutely clear? Yes, Mom,
James replied.
Am I fucking clear?
She repeated, glaring at all of them.
Yes, ma'am,
they chorused. The hatch opened. Hara's go, go, go blurred into white noise. Adrenaline thudded in every vein in waves of ice and fire. Wind roared, and Ava's body wobbled at the change in mass. Michael latched onto her hand. James leapt out first, and Ava couldn't resist a cheer, half a cry of terror, as she and Michael followed after. What a view, she thought. The training ground spread out for miles around them as they fell toward the asteroid. So much open space compared to the main quarter. Rocky, bluish terrain undulated beneath them and shimmered with a frosting of ice. The entire asteroid, officially named Ceres by scientists back in the day, was covered in ice up to 100 kilometers thick. The true depth of this could be seen in the distance, the horizon glowing with mountains of ice where the excavation of TG3 had ended. In grand total, Ceres held more fresh water than Earth by 200 million kilometers cubed. The real kicker? Ceres was roughly the size of India. Ava widened her eyes and tried to focus. Her breathing sucked and echoed inside her helmet. 2 bars of light ran across her screen, just above her eyebrows. Blue, her oxygen meter. Red, her health bar. She took note of the 8 stun turrets dotted across the terrain, and the enemy team dropping from orbit 8 clicks up ahead.
Koala!
James barked, the sound tinny inside Ava's helmet.
That is not a thing,
she replied. He ignored her.
Team Sharp is closer to the first flag. As soon as we land, I'm throwing you. Understood? Yes, sir.
The other training team competing against them had 5 members instead of 3, which hardly seemed fair, but Ava tried to reason that having a man in a super-enhancing bodysuit probably balanced things out. She tapped the disruptor hand cannon strapped to her thigh.
Gibbon!
James said as he crashed to the ground below them. Ice particles erupted beneath his massive boots.
I'm throwing you straight after. That hill is exposed. Bear shields against the turret on the right and incoming fire. Roger Dodger.
Ava glanced across at Michael as he groped his hands up her arm, took her shoulders and gave a massive shove downwards.
You first,
he cried. She drew a deep breath, stomach plummeting, as her fall sped up like a cannonball plunging towards destruction. A hot, pulsing determination swelled inside her chest and stiffened her limbs. The stars and alien terrain filled her eyes like a painting, and somewhere inside her head, a switch flipped. That flag is mine. James bounded to her position, his long mechanical legs stabbing into the mineral-rich rock.
Brace for impact,
he warned.
Hydraulics now!
It took every ounce of strength Ava possessed to move her hands against the forces crushing and pushing against her limbs. The ground was a hell of a lot closer. Panic thumped a strained pattern inside her heart.
Buck, now! I'm trying!
She gripped the curved handholds above her hips and with a grunt tugged them loose from her armor. Compressed air fired out of her boots and she wobbled and lost balance. She tumbled head first, swallowing a scream, and fought to kick her legs back towards the ice.
Ava!
Yelled James. No more stars, only grey rock rushing up to meet her face. Biting her tongue hard enough to almost draw blood, Ava wrenched her legs forward and the glorious sight of stars returned as she flipped upright. Her oxygen bar went down by 3% as she fought to breathe like a sensible human being. That had been too close.
Team Sharp have claimed the first flag,
Hara cried in their helmets.
Shit,
came Michael's hiss. The second Ava's boots dented the ground, 2 terrifyingly big hands plucked her off her feet again. James grunted as he hefted Ava above his shoulder. He took 3 huge strides forward, rearing her backwards. She locked her joints and pinned her arms to her sides. With one harsh cry, James launched her into the air. She shot above the ground, defying minimal gravity.
Rear strike!
James said.
Hit him hard!
Ava couldn't bring herself to reply. Streaks of light burnt across her vision as the turrets fired at the Marines taking rear point in Team Sharp. All weapons, including the turrets, were set to disrupt armor functionality. Hit too often, and their individual health bar would eventually declare that synth as dead. The first turret passed her by in a blink, and Ava's trajectory started arching into the ground again. She reached around for the second handholds in her lower back and yanked them out. Another burst of air, this time from her forearms. She clenched her fists and wrenched them in front of her, aided by the pushing force spilling out around her wrists. Her descent slowed, and inch by inch she angled her body for landing.
I'm coming at ya!
cried Michael.
I'm en route as well,
added James.
Jagged sprint over that crest into the next turret. Get close enough to use it as cover. Gibbon will catch up. I'll make a path to the right and try and get ahead of Team Sharp. I'll cut him off. Got it,
Ava replied. Her boots hit the thin mantle of ice at the base of the hill, and she skidded to a stop. A beam of light instantly scorched the ground beside her, and she lurched into action. She charged a zigzag route up the slope and bombed down the other side. The turret up ahead groaned and sighed as it pivoted to face her, like a giant bug with two deadly eyes. Carving an unpredictable path, ducking and leaping, Ava charged across the open terrain towards it. She tucked herself against the turret's base when she got there and looked back to see Michael surge over the hill she'd just left behind. With a display of agility, he stormed to her position. Movement in Ava's peripheral drew her attention to James, sprinting ahead in the distance, thundering forward like a Goliath.
VI, show map,
Ava said. The terrain turned even more surreal as her helmet's screen covered the undulating land in grid marks. It shifted as she turned her head, matching up with the real world, and dots blinked off over the ice to indicate a path to the nearest flag. Michael soon crashed into the space beside her.
Ready?
He panted, activating the shield core on his arm. The synthetics hummed to life, and Ava drew her hand cannon. She nodded.
2 of Team Sharp are headed east. Let's take 'em out. I've got a flag!
James cheered, no longer visible from their position. It all went downhill from there. Aside from your abysmal failure, at least you don't suck as a team, Hara said as engineers carried away Ava and Michael's armor for proper storage. Members of Team Sharp disembarked from their shuttle nearby with whoops of elation. Their shuttle temporarily drowned out the sounds of the tech hall as it fired off the landing pad and headed back to the docking bay. "We were so close!" Ava groaned, watching the other synths disappear into the bustle. "Yeah, I wouldn't call 4 out of 10 close," said Hara, "but I like your optimism." James appeared by Ava's side, his jumpsuit dripping in clear sludge. "Nice snot," snickered Michael. "How was it, sitting in that bucket of jelly?" A slow grin wiped the frown off of James's face. "Amazing. Best snot bath ever." "Shame that weren't the best performance ever," said Hara. A dark note in her tone made them go quiet. "Team Sharp do have the jump on you. They didn't have to wait for a mech suit to practice as a team before now. But it's not like we didn't put you through drills this past week. You should have done way better than that out there. I'm going easy on you on account of this being your first time in the training grounds, but next time I expect you to win, or at least not fail so miserably. You got good coordination, but none of you have paid attention to each other's attributes. Sterling, you did a pretty good job of trying to organize these 2 clowns, but now you gotta rein it in and stop charging off ahead of them." Ava's face burned. Why here? Why did Hara have to say all this right now in front of dozens of working engineers? Some of them were watching, drawn in by Hara's loud, distinct accent. "Go blow it off," she sighed, waving her hand. "I'll meet you later for a proper debriefing." Engineer Darcy was hovering behind them, waiting to hand over their effects and a towel for James. Darcy gave a nervous smile as he handed Ava her boots and jacket, fidgeting like a rabbit who was lost in the brush. She avoided his gaze altogether, mumbling her thanks. She pulled on her boots and padded jacket over her jumpsuit and sighed. Debriefing later, huh? Whoopee. "How was it? Was it great?" she heard Darcy gush. Ava glanced back and saw he was talking to James, and not about the exercise. "I've never used anything like it," James replied, toweling his chest dry.
Disruptor beams! I can't wait to fire something real. And the suspension inside is like being caught by a wet blanket. Can barely feel any jolt.
Sucking in a breath, Michael bumped his shoulder into Ava's.
Let's leave them to it, shall we? He said.
They left the tech hall side by side and out onto the main road. Ava still felt the effects of minimal gravity. It was like she might float off the sidewalk at any given moment without something heavy on her feet. The sensation lessened when James ran out after them and thumped his hands down on Ava's shoulders.
Don't leave without me, you tossers!
Walking, rather than using the transporter, the three of them strode down the road to the rec bar. It was barely 8 p.m., but lively music and chatter hummed beyond the second interior door already, and Ava could smell bittersweet smoke. Michael halted inside the foyer, and Ava tugged on James's arm to keep him from rushing off. Written in red above the next steel door were the words, "Bad form will not be tolerated."
Do you hear that?
Michael asked, cocking his head. Ava listened harder. The synths further inside were all chanting a tune in unison.
Yeah, I know that song,
she said.
Just on the road! That's the opening theme!
Why are they chanting? Ava didn't get to finish as Michael charged past her. The door slid open on his approach, just as the synths inside reached the song's crescendo and then fell about cheering.
Are they having a screening?
Asked James. Ava shrugged and shook her head. Who had the patience to watch vid shows in the rec bar? It was noisy even at the best of times. Was it a special episode? Had the 4 Justicates it featured done something extraordinary? She couldn't recall anything in the news bulletins. They strode in after Michael, who jostled his way into the gathering crowd, asking for details. The rec bar consisted of numerous metal tables and chairs, a sitting area in the left corner, a ping-pong table, and a non-alcoholic bar at the back. White spotlights blazed down from the ceiling, offset by the blue and purple light panels in the walls. The overall effect was both stark and welcoming. Vid screens were mounted near the ceiling with a camera atop each one, discreetly monitoring their activities. Ava glanced at each screen, not seeing anything that looked like the docudrama causing all the commotion.
Who knows?
She said to James, and led the way to the bar at the back. The tables on the left side of the room were obscured by the crowd, but she caught a glimpse of someone's boots propped up on a chair. Someone who seemed to be the centre of attention. James bought a bag of potato chips and sat with Ava at one of the tables, splitting it open to share. Ava spotted 2 members of Team Sharp standing at the dry bar. She shoved a chip in her mouth and hunched forward.
How come we don't have a team name?
She grumbled. James glanced behind him and saw who she was glaring at.
I dunno.
He leant his cheek on his fist, then grinned at her.
Because we're the 3 Musketeers.
Ava laughed.
I love it, but I'm not sure how well it rolls off the tongue in a firefight.
At that moment, Hara's voice rang out from the main door.
All right, settle down.
Ava twisted in her seat to see that the woman was grinning. Did she have to follow them everywhere?
There's a Justicate in here who shouldn't be, and I'm here to take him back.
Hands on hips, she approached the crowd. Most of them shuffled out of her way to reveal the man sitting down and holding everyone's attention. 2 synths sat with him, obviously enjoying their place in all the commotion. Ava spotted Michael practically gasping for breath and hopping from foot to foot. He'd somehow managed to push his way to the table side.
Is that? She heard James say.
Second Justicate, Remus Lancer, one of the 2 heroes who foiled the Rosette Conference assassination plot, and one of the 4 Justicates to feature in Michael's favourite vid show. Sitting with one arm hooked over the back of his chair, the man blew out a steady stream of smoke and watched Hara with a sly grin. You need to leave, Hara said. You ain't an NCO no more, sweetheart. No mingling with the ground troops. The higher ranks are missing you in the Justicate bar.
I'd rather not,
Remus replied in a fancy British accent that was startlingly more pronounced than Ava remembered.
And before you mention it, this isn't a real cigarette. That would do more damage to me than your precious chickens here.
My chickens know their place and where they can and cannot go. Get out. Clearing his throat, not once losing his smile, Remus did no more than flick his neck-length hair out of his face. How was he permitted to get away with that haircut?
Nessa, dear, I don't wish to usurp your authority in front of everyone, but...
He shrugged.
I do outrank you. I'll have to decline.
A hint of annoyance tightened Tara's smile. Do I need to get Arzuma?
We all know his rank is nothing but decorative.
Ava laughed and held her breath in one go. The man's arrogance had a compelling delivery to it, and she found it hard to disapprove. She threw a glance at James, who had focused on entirely the wrong detail.
Did he call her Nessa?
James asked, choked with disbelief. Ava noticed the way Hara tongued her cheek and did her best to look unimpressed. How well did these two know each other? A calculated, chilling gleam filled Hara's eyes, and Ava guessed their past wasn't all a basket of fun and roses. "Everyone!" Hara announced, spreading her arms. "Leave immediately! Get out right now, or you will spend the next 3 hours on the drill square." She beamed down at Remus. "You can thank our superstar here to an early end of your fun and games." A murmur of protest began to arise. "I will not repeat myself," Hara barked, gruff and all friendliness gone. Grumbling and cussing, everyone collected their things and began filtering out the door. Remus took his feet off the chair he'd been using as a footstool, no longer smiling. "See it," Hara said. He raised his hands and sank back into his seat. Michael rushed over to Ava and James, pulling hideous faces of joy and awe. He looked ready to explode, but could utter no more than a few strangled sentences. James gripped his shoulders and frog-marched him to the door. "Not you, EVA BUCK," Hara called out. An unpleasant lurch filled Ava's chest. She turned back to see Hara pointing at her with a flat hand, not even looking in her direction. "Ma'am?" Hara snapped her gaze down her arm, blonde ponytail bouncing. "This is an opportune moment for you, I think." She pointed one finger at the ground. "Stay." "Ava, Ava," Michael hissed. He pressed a napkin into her hand. "Get me a signature, yeah? Yeah? God, you're so lucky." Laughing at his intense, serious gaze, Ava shoved him out the door. It shut behind him with a dull electrical hum, and muffled the sound of irritated synths shuffling out the foyer. Music continued to play from one of the screens in the rec bar, lessening the awkward silence left behind.
"Well, aren't you a popular one?"
Remus said, stubbing out his smoke. "Please," replied Hara. "I'm not here to boost viewer statistics." She leant her fists onto the table. "Some of us have to live here and maintain what goes on. Don't ever speak like that to me again. Not in front of subordinates." Remus laced his fingers together in his lap, and Ava took note of his navy blue dress uniform. Very smart, very fitted, very decorative.
Of course, he said. "Terribly sorry. As a show of my good faith, I won't report you for doing exactly the same thing just now."
Hara scowled, baring her teeth. "I swear to God. When do you leave?" Smirking, Remus slid his gaze over to Ava. She clutched harder at the napkin Michael had given her, battling the flutters that came to her stomach. Hara straightened up, sighing. "Buck, sit down. I don't know if you're aware, but Lancer here had the same eye troubles as you. He's now got synthetic ones. Have a little heart-to-heart. Maybe he can put you at ease about the process."
"Absolutely," Remus cried. "I've got a speech all prepared for you."
Ava hesitantly sat in the chair beside him. "I thought I was doing all right as I am," she said. Hara slumped into the seat on her other side. "You are, but after today, you could still do better. Lancer, if it ain't too taxing for you, mind explaining the benefits of new eyes?" "The benefits," he repeated, looking Ava up and down. A whispering, crackling noise started inside her head, and she did her best not to flinch. Remus raised one eyebrow, let out a long, deep breath, then said,
20/20 vision. Tired less often. No more stabbing migraines. The ability to zoom in across distances. That's it, I think. Painless procedure for the most part. Irritating maintenance, but I think that might just be an issue between me and my engineer. Other than that, there's nothing more I can tell you."
He gave Ava a heart-melting smile.
"I'm sorry, my dear. If I'd been notified I was to give a lecture on glass eyes, I might have been able to tell you more. As it stands, I'm no expert on the matter. I just shoot things."
A devilish look flashed behind his rich brown eyes, and Ava nodded. "Don't worry, I'm not really thinking about it. I'd rather ask you for something else, though." And she put Michael's napkin on the table.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.
You're listening to BigWorldNetwork.